Yeah, it is another episode of the Autumn Windbags. RJ Clifford flying solo for a sec. Soto will be joining us here shortly. Let's have some fun today. Either way, uh, always, every time, remember, like, comment, subscribe, especially today. Get in the chat, keep me company while we're waiting for Soto. A lot to get to on some really big news today, which we'll just dive right into right now. It was reported, I believe, Ian Rappaport, the other guys all kind of report at the same time. Raiders general manager Mike Mayock out. The Raiders released the official statement. We have relieved Mike Mayock of his duties as general manager of the Las Vegas Raiders. We thank Mike for his contributions of the last 3 years in helping to form the foundation for the franchise to build upon in its future. So he's gone. Here 3 years and then gone. You can go over all the different moves that he made. Obviously, the first rounders that he picked, Farrell, Jacobs, Abram, Ruggs, Arnett, Leatherwood. Underwhelming at best, atrocious picks at worst. Just a really bad run of first round picks. And they had some great ones, right? You had 3 first round picks a couple seasons ago, 2 before, 2 after that. And they just kept swinging and missing on those really, really important ones. Also reported from Ian Rappaport, the GM search underway. The Raiders have put in a request to interview Patriots defensive assistant Jared Mayo. Source said their search begins, and that's not all. They also requested de facto GM Dave Ziegler and expect the Raiders to put in a request for Colts executive Ed Dodds as well. Here is Ian Rappaport on NFL Live earlier.
A major change for the Las Vegas Raiders. They have just a couple minutes ago informed General Manager Mike Mayock that he is no longer working for the team. Mayock was fired after 3 years running the personnel department for the Las Vegas Raiders. And sure, there was some success leading them to the playoffs, but of course, there were misses as well. There was the Cleveland Farrell first-round draft pick. His first clearly did not work out. Of course, Henry Ruggs, another first-rounder, had a serious legal issue going on earlier in the year and was eventually released. Damon Arnett also released. Alex Leatherwood drafted him as a tackle, now as a guard. There were free agent misses as well. The Trent Brown signing clearly did not work out for the Raiders. Antonio Brown trade as well. So Mike Mayock, after 3 years as the Las Vegas Raiders general manager, now officially out. The team just a couple of seconds ago released a short statement saying that, in fact, Mayock has been relieved of his duties and thanking Mike for his contributions over the last 3 years in helping form the foundation for the franchise to build upon in the future.
So that Ian Rappaport earlier today. So this is all coming down over the last few hours. Mayock, gone. So a couple things. I was really hoping that we would get to see Mayock work as an actual GM for a while. Because remember, when he was the GM, it was John Gruden pulling all the strings, right? Mark Davis used the old line. Yeah, it was 51% Gruden, 49% Mayock. It could be 51% or 100%. It's the same. He had final say. John Gruden had final say on the roster. He was the czar of football. He was the head coach. He was the offensive coordinator. He was the play caller. He was the GM, head of personnel. He probably picked the curtains in the front office. He probably decided where they had one of those low flow toilets in the guest restrooms. Like he got to do everything. John Gruden decided. He was like, they called him head coach. They called him GM. He was the czar of the Raiders. He was the dictator. He was the emperor. He was in charge of just about everything. Only Mark Davis trumped him. And so with him gone, I was kind of looking forward to hopefully having Mike Mayock be an actual GM, to be able to actually decide roster decisions and see how he did. I liked his leadership when Gruden went away. Remember during that first press conference, it was Mayock who went first and told everybody, Gruden's gone. This sucks, but we're going to move on. We're going to push forward. We're going to persevere. And he really showed some leadership qualities that I really like to see. The problem is you can have all the best leadership qualities in the world. You can say all the right things. He was obviously great on camera, right? He was a broadcaster for a decade. So clearly, like, he was a great communicator and knew how to get his message across, which is part of the job. It's a smaller part of the job, but it's part of the job. But I really wanted to see how he'd be able to handle personnel on his own. How would this next draft look with Mayock making the final decision? How would this free agent look moving forward? How would he handle Derek Carr's contract that's coming up after next season? All those 1-year contracts that we had this season, all those 1-year deals that we had. Who's he going to take? Who's he not? Is he going to overpay? What's he going to do? Is he going to reach? I was really curious to see how he would do. But here's the kicker. And this is why I was going to be okay with whether Mark Davis fired or kept Mayock. Because all this really comes down to, and the most important part of this whole scenario, who was in charge and who was leading the push for all those terrible and even the good draft picks during his tenure. I know that John Gruden had final say, but was Mayock pushing for these guys that fell apart? Was Mayock pushing for, and we know that Mayock was pushing for Arnett. That was one of them. Was he also pushing for Abram? Was he also pushing for Clay Farrell? Was he pushing for Henry Ruggs? Or were these all John Gruden calls? And then who got credit for the awesome mid-round picks that we got, right? Max Crosby, Hunter Renfrow, Nate Hobbs. Who was picking these guys? Who was getting credit and who was getting blame? I didn't know that. And I don't think anyone outside of that office knew. But I think Mark Davis knew. Because Mark Davis has his finger on the pulse of this team. Because he doesn't do anything else, right? He's not one of these billionaire owners who just buys a team as a hobby, right? He's not a billionaire owner. He's like these multi-billion-dollar owners are just like, well, I have this team because it's something cool I can talk about at the country club. I bought this franchise to get chicks and to have a sweet box seat, right? Like this is all Mark Davis does. This is where all his money is where all his attention is. And so I'm convinced that Mark Davis knew who was making those picks, who was picking the good ones, who was picking the bad ones. And so leading into this, and I said it on one of last week's shows, whatever they do with Mayock, I'm happy with it because that will tell us who was making the good picks and who was making the bad picks. And because Mark Davis got rid of Mayock, it led me to believe that he was probably in charge of a lot of those bad picks. I mean, if it was all John Gruden with those whiffs in the first round, I think Davis keeps Mayock. If it was all Mayock picking the Nate Hobbs, the Max Crosbys, the Hunter Renfrows, those awesome mid-round picks that have been crushing it for us, starters, Pro Bowlers, then I think he keeps Mayock. But because they got rid of him, and they got rid of him quick, right? I mean, the Raiders season ended less than 48 hours ago. And as of now, Rich Bisaccia is still the head coach. There was a report that got deleted, like a rumor that Greg Olson was fired. That's not true as of yet. He's still on the squad. Everyone else is still there. They got rid of Mayock first. That kind of tells me something. That kind of tells me, he was probably in charge of all those bad picks. And what do you do when you do a lot of bad picks? When you're given this great cachet of first rounders and you whiff and whiff and whiff and whiff and you strike out 6-7 times, you're gone. There's another part of this too. There's always this every single time firing season comes around in any sport, and coaches, GMs, assistants, janitors, whoever, right? Anytime people get fired, there's this whole idea that, well, you're never supposed to root for someone who gets fired. You never want to be happy about someone losing their job. It's never okay. It's part of the business and you just kind of suck it up and you deal with it, but you're always supposed to be sad. You're always supposed to be angry about it. Like, well, that was a man's job. You don't have to do that. That's not true at all. Because whoever has that job and they're fired for good cause, there's someone else that's probably better that doesn't have that job. It's a zero-sum game, especially with Mayock. He's going to go back to TV. He'll be fine. Mayock's not going to starve, right? He's not going to be sitting, in a single-bedroom apartment back in Oakland, eating a can of beans raw, right? He's a multimillionaire. He'll be fine. But every time someone gets fired, the idea is if it's happening correctly and they're fired for the correct cause and there's not, nepotism or shady politics going on and they're gone because they're just not doing the job, that means someone else who could do the job, who might be able to do the job, gets their shot. It's a zero-sum game. So I never want to hear about people well, I never want to talk about someone's job. I never talk about getting fired. No, because there's someone else making less money who could be qualified who's not taking that job. All right, so what does this mean for Bisaccia and the rest of the coaches on the staff? So Mark Davis is clearly already looking for a new GM. He's already looking for, I'm sure he's already interviewing coaches as well. Doing the GM first could mean that he wants the GM to be part of that coaching search, that he wants the GM to at least have some input, maybe, have some decision-making with that process as well. He wants to hire from the top down, right? You go GM, then you go coach, and then you can make your roster decisions from there. Because before you make these giant decisions, which free agents are we keeping? Who are we going after? Before we start looking at, the draft, you got to know who your coaches are going to be, right? Gus Bradley, with his defense, you don't need a corner that does a lot of man. We don't run a lot of man. You don't want, a type of receiver for an offense that we're not running, right? It all depends on the coaches and their scheme and what they need. And so you want that personnel stuff done. And there's a huge decision coming up. Derek Carr. That's a huge decision. What do you do with Derek Carr? What do you pay him? Do you trade him? What do you do? Franchise tag him? I mean, there's a lot of decisions. And this is like signing the wrong quarterback or signing the right quarterback or signing the wrong quarterback to the right deal or the right quarterback to the wrong deal. That could derail a franchise for years. For years. If you don't do it right. And if you guys have been listening to the show for long enough, I think Derek Carr is more than capable to lead this team to the Super Bowl. I think he's more than capable to do great things for us. Are there better quarterbacks out there? Absolutely. Are the Raiders going to get any of them? No. I don't think so. This Aaron Rodgers to the Raiders, it's a pipe dream. He was supposed to go last year. Where is he? Still on the Packers. Still a first, probably going to be the NFL MVP. Still a 1 seed. He's not going anywhere. You look at this draft, there's no quarterbacks in it. The team in the locker room like and respect Carr. And again, we'll talk all day long about what he needs to work on. Those turnovers are killing me. Oh, God. Every time he fumbles, a part of my soul dissipates and goes to hell, right? I'm not telling you he's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But, man, are we going to get someone better? Good luck. Hey, look who decided to join us.
Let me guess.
He himself. Juan Soto.
RJ's telling you why we shouldn't get rid of Carr because we can't get anybody better, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, you know the story. You know how this works.
The story. Cool. That's what I missed.
So we saw the report.
What kind of propaganda you've been spreading?
Carr, not that Carr, but Mayock gone. There was a report out that Greg Olsen was fired. That wasn't true. It was just kind of rumored and didn't happen. So that's still out there. So just Mayock fired, and less than 48 hours after the last game. Mm-hmm. What does that tell you, Soto?
That shit was planned from a long time ago. It was planned, but not necessary during the season. And why rock the boat when you don't have to, type of thing. And it was already ready. The blade was already sharp.
I can't hear you for some reason, and this is killing me.
What? How about now?
Damn it, what's happening? I can't hear you. Just keep talking. I'll take care of it.
All right. Well, my mic is working. I think the people at home can hear me. How about now? No?
Just keep talking.
So yeah, this happening so quickly after the season's over. This was already going to happen. I think this signifies that to me that Coach Bisaccia is not going to be the coach moving forward. I think that with a lot of I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily call it rebuilds, but changes of direction. I think that Mark Davis wants to pair a new head coach with a new GM and just move forward from there. I don't know what RG's been talking about probably talking about how Carr is the best player ever and blah blah blah. There are certain situations where we should keep Carr, and there are certain situations where we should move on from Carr. And it all depends on who's leading the team and who's making the decisions and what they see and what they expect moving forward. We can say all we want what we think, and unfortunately, nothing that we say can be proven. Uh, one of the schools of thought is, well, Carr had a great season, and he had one of his best statistical years. He had so many yards, this and that. He also had a lot of turnovers. He didn't have as many touchdowns, but the yards were there and the comebacks and this and that. And he was still a first round and out in the playoffs. Is that his ceiling? What else can he do? Does he need too much? You give any quarterback enough, and they're going to expect a lot more from them. What do we expect moving forward from this team? It's really hard to say. We have some key free agents, some in our secondary, some that were pressed into more duty. We didn't have Trayvon Mullen for most of the year, which is a starting corner of ours. Amik Robinson started for a little bit, and he got hurt, and we lost him for a lot of the year. Casey Hayward is a free agent. What are we going to do with him? What's going to happen with Jonathan Abram? What do we do with him? He was having a decent season against the run, but still maybe a little bit better, but still not great against the pass. How is that going to work with a new defensive coordinator if we get one? I honestly, guys, I don't think that if we get a new head coach, he's going to want to keep the old staff. It's not very probable, is what I will say. Just because our defense has been better than it has been in quite some time doesn't necessarily mean it was good. Doesn't necessarily mean that we should be okay with it. And that's what I want to impress on everyone here. I want to make sure that when I speak about moving forward or moving on or moving in a different direction from where we are currently, I want to make sure that it's not that I'm down talking or I'm shitting on the Raiders or whatever, because I'm not. It's my expectations have always been high, even though I know in past years, we know when we've had bad teams, like lesser talent on these teams, but my expectations are still high. And I think that when we start to waver on our expectations is when we start to waver on our principles and what we want from our team. And is, a mid to high 20s ranked defense is what we want. Is it better than it has been? Of course it is. Has it helped us in a lot of games? Of course it has. But is it where it needs to be? No, it really isn't. Is this the type of defense that we want to play moving forward? I don't know. That's debatable. Did it help us this year? Of course. Yes, it did. But again, you can't just look at 1 year in a snapshot. You have to look at the couple of years moving forward. And I think that's what Mark Davis thought as well. Does Mayock know that the roster now? Can Mayock, be a GM moving forward for the next year? Yeah, he probably could. But if you're Mark Davis and you probably already know that you want to move on at coach, you're going to want that marriage between coach and GM. I don't know where the hell RJ went. We'll have to see where he went. But that's a big story today. A couple of other stories. The search is going. There's been a lot of rumors going around that Gerard Mayo, the position coach, the linebacker coach, I believe he is, for the New England Patriots, Mark Davis has requested to interview Gerard Mayo for the head coaching position. which is interesting. There are a few candidates out there that I think have a lot more experience than Gerard Mayo. Not that he's not a good coach, but he's only had, I think, 3 years of coaching experience. Never had any type of coordinator style experience. And, even not even a special teams coordinator, just a position coach, which I don't know if that's happened too successfully in the past. And also their director of player personnel, his first name escapes me, but his last name is Ziegler. He rose up in the ranks with the Patriots as a scout. Then he's just kind of became a pro scout, pro personnel, and then assistant director of player personnel. And now he's the director of player personnel with New England. Of course, we all know that Bill Belichick runs the show there. As far as what I think of that moving forward, I really hate to think that Mark Davis, with the advances that the Raiders have had and with the position that the Raiders have had in equality, that they would just throw out a name to interview a coach, just because he's. Can you hear me now?
I got you.
All right, you sound like shit.
Oh, great, wonderful. The Decepticons have attacked my microphone, trying to ruin this for us.
How about now? Test 1 2.
Much better.
Yeah, and there's those golden pipes that you guys were like waiting for.
Yeah. I just want to finish my thought real quick. With all the advances that the Raiders have made as an organization, I would hate to think that they would only request to interview Gerard Mayo just to fulfill a Rooney Rule. I hope that's not the case. But it's just a little bit questionable, considering he's only been a coach for 3 years and it's only been a position coach, no coordinator type. It's just a little bit strange. The first name we hear about interviewing for a coach as a position coach with so little experience and not very high level experience in coaching. That was it.
You talk about coaching now?
I was kind of bouncing on a couple different things.
Yeah. So my big thing with Mayock was what we talked about last week. Was the number one thing, he does a lot of things good that are all like C or D level skills, right? Great communicator, says the right things, leads by example. Like those are all like good things. Like those are things you want. But the most important thing you want is, how does he handle contracts and how does he draft? That's like the two biggest things, right? Can you find talent and can you sign them to team-friendly deals? Those are the two biggest things. And we never really knew, right? Who was the guy pushing all these draft picks that fell through, and who was pushing the draft picks that succeeded, right? Who was that guy? John Gruden had to sign off on all of them, right? So he had like the final say. But was it Mayock pushing these like trash picks that didn't go anywhere, and Gruden was the one getting the good ones, or vice versa, or a combination of the two? And my things like, whatever Mark Davis decides, I'm going to assume he knows, and he'll make that decision. So if like we keep Mayock, that means, okay, it was probably Gruden pushing all these bad picks, but because he got rid of Mayock as the first guy, because there's going to be a lot of dominoes to fall, right? Like maybe he keeps the coaching staff, doubt it, but maybe, right? Like I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of dominoes falling. And the very first one was Mayock, which tells me two things. One, he was the culprit. And two, that's what you want to do. You hire and fire top down. Like he wants probably the GM to be like, all right, give me some input on who I should get as a head coach. Give me some input on, these free agents. Give me some input on these contracts, right? Like hold my hand with all this stuff. Because you got to work with all these guys. You got to sign all these, you got to work all these contracts with all these new players. So those are the two things. Those are the two main things I took with how fast Mayock was ousted this season. After, again, like this is such a weird scenario, right? Because it could be a complete closet cleaning, which is weird for a team that went to the playoffs, right? Because it's so unique, because the coach was fired, not because he was bad, but because he was bad on emails. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And this is at worst. This last season was at worst the second best Raiders season in the last 20 years. At worst, the second best, right? So normally you don't think, they're going to wipe the slate clean. They're going to start over. Without Gruden, there was just this power vacuum. There's just this abyss of black because he was in charge of everything. He led everything. He picked everything. Head coach, offensive coordinator, GM, in charge of personnel. He probably decided that it was Sloppy Joe Wednesdays, right? Like, he had his finger in everything, right? You smell that finger and it smells like the entire building. And so it's like, all right, we got to make some changes here because all these guys that are here, we're all interim. Like, Olsen was never brought in to be a play caller and actual offensive coordinator. He was there to help Gruden. Bisaccia wasn't supposed to be the head coach. He was a special teams coach. He was brought in because Gruden was gone. So it's this weird, like, do you fill this vacuum with people that are there and have them fill the space, or do you have to get new people? And it's starting right now with new people, starting with Mayock out, new GM in.
Yeah, I mean, look, Mayock just really wasn't that good at his job, considering all the assets that we had to build a team. All the first round, we had what 6 or how many first round draft picks did we have in
the 3 seasons
the last
of Mayock?
3 years? It's like 6.
Farrell, Jacobs, Abram, Ruggs, Arnett, Leatherwood. 6. 3, 2, and 1.
One is going to be. I mean, how many of those are going to be on our team? 0, maybe.
I mean, you mean going to sign a second contract?
Yeah.
Maybe Abram. Maybe Abram if he keeps improving. Oh, well, again, I'm not really to sign off Leatherwood yet. I mean, he had a bad starting, rookie year, but it's a rookie year. Like it's way too early to say he's gone or not.
Okay,
but dude, have a good rookie year.
Let's give him 2 out of 6. Let's give him 2 out of 6. That's
let's just say 5. Let's just say the 5 guys that we have more than just their rookie season.
Okay,
Ruggs, but you know how that went.
But then look at this. Okay, we have nearly $27 million in bonuses paid to Corey Littleton, Kwiatkowski, Nassib, and Richard in 22.
And that's the other part is the free agent signings that were. But
awful. That's the thing is that's all a part of it, man. And you have to take a look at a couple things. Is you have to take a look at the cap's getting bigger, and that's great, but the cap's getting bigger for everyone else too, right? How are we going to be able to solidify this team, and how? And like I was talking about this in the last offseason, we have a lot of gaps, so we need to get those studs and duds, right? We need to get those the marquee players at their position, and then we need to get those 1-year guys and hope the 1-year guys pan out. The problem that I'm seeing is we had a lot of things go our way this year. We had almost every single one of our defensive tackles that we signed played off of their ass this year. Okay. The corners that we signed played off of their ass this year. What does that tell you going forward for next year's first, 1-year guys that we get? It seems to balance itself out, man. And I'm just really nervous. And I think that everyone in the Raiders organization sees it too. We got really lucky on a lot of these games, man, especially early in the season and also late in the season, where there was a lot of last-second wins, man.
We overplayed our talent for sure. On that 4-game win streak, how many of those teams were we more talented than? I don't think any of them. Chargers more talented than us in basically every position, minus like 2. Right? The Colts had more Pro Bowlers than anyone in the AFC. Like we were. And that was weird about this season was like there was something special this season that was tangible. like locker room stuff, like whether it was Bisaccia's leadership or just cohesiveness or luck or they
look,
banded
guys,
together after everything that happened, like whatever it was, like it wasn't talent that got us to the playoffs.
That
Definitely
doesn't translate year to year. That doesn't translate year to year. That is that locker room, and that's it. After that, this year is over. That's why I said after the game.
Well, it's not a clean slate. I mean, you can carry pieces of it over, hopefully.
Yeah,
but right.
But the issue is
You
that
bank
magic that this team has. Exactly.
Don't bank.
You have to bank on talent. And who are we going to bank on? We're going to bank on Mayock, 1 out of 6 first-round picks, and all that dead money to these players who really aren't giving us anything. That's not good, man. We have all these holes and less money that we need to have because of Mark Mayock and his decision making. So, with that, you take a step back and say, okay, we're fortunate to be where we were from a talent perspective, from a purely talent perspective, because talent wins in the NFL. You put Vince Lombardi on that 0-16 Lions team or the 0-16 Cleveland team, they're not making the playoffs, okay? You need to have talent.
We punched above our weight class. It's like when you bang a 6. Like you had no place banging a 6, but your charm, your personality.
She was drunk. What do you want me to do?
Yeah,
she was drunk and she said yes. I recorded her saying yes. So
our 4-game win streak were those drunk chicks that you take home.
And the thing is you can't bank on that moving forward. What you need to bank on is, okay, can I bank on this happening again, not just next year, but the next few years? And the thing that I was saying before about John Gruden that I think you and Rory both were like screaming at me about is John Gruden is a firework. He builds up to one big year and then the team falls to shit. Right? Or 1 or 2 big years where they're really good and then they fall off a cliff. That's been everywhere he's gone. They've built up and then boom, they're gone. And that's seemed like they were building towards that with this team as well. And I don't know if that Mark Davis wants to do that with this team. I think it's really smart moving forward to have a new head coach and a new GM handcuffed and married with the same vision moving forward. It's just smart ownership.
Yeah, you want them to have the same vision. Like, yeah, exactly. Like you can't have them fighting each other. Then you'll get what happened in with the Dolphins, right? Where the GM and the head coach are fighting with each other, and they fire a coach who's had back-to-back winning seasons in Brian Flores. It's like,
I'm sure he's fine. He's getting paid. He's going to get paid.
He's getting picked up somewhere.
Oh, he's going to get paid big time.
Side note, part of me thinks like, did Brian Flores like purposely try to get out of there? Because that place is a dumpster fire. Like Tua, ownership. Like, was he like, let me be an extra giant dickhead to the GM today and see if I can get fired. Get my severance package and then go somewhere better.
A little extra spunky.
He's no dummy.
It's like when the daughter gets old enough and starts getting spunky with her mama, just so she can like show her what's up.
Well, she finally starts dating a dude, and she's like, "Well, if you kick me out, I'll just move in with him. That'll show you." She turns into a stripper, dating a guy in a biker gang. That's Flores, and we could be that biker gang. I don't know. We'll talk about it.
He's a good coach, man.
He's good, and he's a disciplinarian, which is what this like a team that leads the league in penalties every single season needs something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I like the way this is going. It's
for 4 years we've been trending in the right direction, right? Like 4-12, 7-9, 8-8, 10-7. Like that's really important to me. Like that's the most important thing to me.
Are we
going in the right direction?
I honestly do think though this incarnation of this roster with this leadership structure, this is about as good as they were going to get.
Yeah, I was saying, like whatever
they've topped out.
Some kind of magic happened this season, and everyone came together, and like
there's no reason why they should have won
at the end. I mean, the original roster we could have, right, with Ruggs and and our starting guards and an offense that had more continuity with Gruden. Like I think originally this team was poised to do big things, but they overcame all those things with whatever that special magic is. And that's the other part too. It's like, how do you something untangible, right? It's like trying to like grab a cloud and like take it from one season to the next. Like, how do you?
Well,
How do
that's
you
what I
do
said
that?
exactly. It's like that doesn't translate year to year because it's
Yeah.
you know, the guy that you look at and you just kind of give a head nod to, like, that guy's not here this year. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, it's weird. It doesn't work that way. So what does this mean moving forward? Well, there's been a couple of names floated around. Ziegler from the Patriots is assistant, or he's the director of player personnel. The guy that calls the shots in New England is fucking Belichick. Okay, he's the guy that calls the shots. But you have to have, when you're a coach coaching, you have to have a guy scouting. And the director of player personnel, basically what he does is he gathers all the information from the pro scouts. He gets all the information from the college scouts. So he gets that information and he analyzes all that information, and then he presents that information to Belichick, who would be the guy who makes the decisions.
But that's never really been Belichick's strength or the Patriots' strength, really, right? Like they haven't been. People think they're great drafters, like they're really not. They just hoard draft picks and just by like by volume, like they get good ones. What they're great at is getting rid of guys at just the right time, right? Like how much is this guy worth?
Well, that's about
Trade
player.
him.
That's player personnel as well.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
also player personnel,
and that's a part of it, sure, right? And you want that skill in our in our building. But I feel like more importantly, and something that they don't do well, like the whole like everyone keeps trying to replicate New England, right? Everyone hires a New England coordinator, position coach. Everyone hires New England front office guys. It almost never works. It almost never works. Like it's Belichick. Belichick makes that work as Belichick. You know what I'm saying? It's like saying like
because he had Tom Brady.
Yeah, and he had Tom Brady, and he has Robert Kraft, like one of the better owners in the league, right? Like everyone tries to replicate that. And I'm not saying there's no one good to hire, right? I'm not saying don't hire a guy from the Pats as a GM, but you can't be like, all right, we're going to do things the Patriot way now. It's like, no one does the Patriot way. No, the other 31 teams can't. They don't have Kraft. They don't have Belichick. They don't have that.
One thing that we did talk about was their leadership structure in New England earlier this year about why they're successful. And part of that leadership structure is people that you put in high positions, how they kind of put the tree underneath them, right? And how they build that strong foundation for the team, and how they go about doing their business, how they go about scouting, how they go about getting, knowing who to pay and who not to pay, and, not giving Corey Littleton, Nick Kwiatkowski those crazy deals when, maybe they shouldn't get them, right?
In all fairness, like we universally love that Kwiatkowski, those two linebacker pickups. Like I don't want to give him a pass.
The Littleton one, yes, I did like that one. The Kwiatkowski one, he didn't even start in Chicago.
I was doing well, but when he did, because the Chicago's defense is so great, right? When he did, he was balls out. So even then, I was just like, oh, cool. Like I think this guy, like he was waiting for his opportunity to finally shine. And honestly, like. And also, we're just so desperate for good linebackers that you're just
the same thing happened with both of these guys. Is they looked a lot better than they actually were because they played on great defenses.
Yeah,
and it amassed a lot of the things. But the more interesting name that's been floated around is Ed Dodds. Now, Ed Dodds is the assistant GM with the Indianapolis Colts, and if you want to talk about good drafting.
Yeah.
Talk about the Indianapolis Colts, because they may not have a quarterback, but they got fucking everything else. I'm talking everything else.
And this is what's so hot and cold about Dodds, because what's probably the biggest personnel decision the Raiders are going to have to make next season?
Yeah.
Derek Carr, right?
Yeah.
And these guys
these
guys bet the farm on Carson Wentz.
That was Frank Reich.
It was he had to sign off, like he was part of it, right? Like you're right, like it wasn't only him, but it's like it's a big decision, and
he had to get talked into it.
They don't have a franchise for it. Like there's not a franchise that have a good track record of that. I like Dodds. I'm not saying he's gone. I'm just saying like the biggest thing we have to worry about coming up is the thing that they have the biggest black eye on, which is something to think about.
I mean, talent is talent, man. Yeah, he's shown that he's been a part of a good team, and that's what that's in the tree of, like I said, the Ozzie Newsome Ozzie Newsome was like an assistant GM, and he was kind of like just one of the guys in the room, but smart guy, hard worker, always knew the answers, always knew where to find the answers if he didn't know. And the Ravens were like, hey, man, guess what? You're the guy now. And they just ended up cranking picks, hitting over and over and over again. And it's because he was given the shot. He was given a chance to do it. And Ozzie Newsome's game plan, the way he drafts, unfortunately, the Ravens had, for them, I mean, not for us, but for them, they had a lot of injuries this year. But without that, I mean, they always have a strong defense. They always have people who make plays on offense. They always have a strong team. And, that's something that we can't always say about our team. But, we need to find these guys. And also, he was Dodds was an intern, I think, from like 03 to 06. He was an Al Davis intern. So these are things that, that's a tie there too. So it's not just that.
Knowing Mark Davis,
he's a
that's
Raider
like,
guy.
That's probably the biggest part, is that he was with the Raiders for a time. Like that.
But
Mark
the
Davis
good thing for us is, the good thing for us is, the good thing for us is he also has the experience and good experience too. We'll see where it goes. I'm not opposed to anything right now, because anyone who they hire is going to be a lot smarter in this than I am. I just want to make sure that we don't get, like you said, a whole Dolphin situation where the guy, they say the right things because they want to get the job, and then when they're in there, they're like, okay, well, I fucking hate you.
I just want them to work in concert with who the coaches are, which is why I'm glad they're making this. If they're going to make the move, they made it first, right? GM first, and you go from there, and have them have a little bit of input on coach, a little bit of input on everything moving forward, because they're going to need that kind of relationship, right? You got to work with them. John Gruden didn't need a relationship with anybody. He was in charge of everybody.
He did everything. He
didn't have to like massage anybody's decision making. He just said, do this or else, right? Which is why Reggie McKenzie and him didn't work out, right? He was just like, I just want my own guy. And that's probably the other part too, is Mayock was brought in as Gruden's guy. Like, he was Gruden's dude. And now that Gruden's gone, it's like, what's keeping him there,
One of the things that I'm noticing too
Not
is
results.
Well, no, yeah. What I'm noticing is that I think maybe Mayock was brought in as an information gatherer, not really a decision maker. Yeah. I mean, that's not what you need in a GM.
That's why I thought for the longest time that all those great picks were his, because I can see Gruden being like, all right, I know who I want in rounds 1 and 2. Like, I'm cherry picking my dudes. And then, like, I don't want to be bothered with like doing study on like our 5th and 6th round draft pick. That's just kind of like just my general thinking, like how I think Gruden thinks, which is why I was in my mind. I was like, I think these great mid-round picks are Mayock. But
Gruden was super pumped when they got Nate Hobbs. I don't know if you remember that. He was like, yeah, he did one of these things.
You know why?
Sweet
name. Sweet. He loves sweet names. Alex
Calvin
Leatherwood,
Hobbs.
Divine Diablo, Nate Hobbs.
I've been working on my John Gruden.
Just in
Calvin
time.
Hobbs. Nate Hobbs. Calvin Hobbs. Good name.
Great timing working on your John Gruden impersonation is going to come in handy.
Fuck that puto.
All right. So Mayock out. The GM search is underway. Davis is making his picks. He's doing his interviews, looking around. I just want someone who and we talked about this before, someone that knows how to run a Fortune 500 company type of mentality, not a ma mentality that the Raiders have been doing for decades. Like, I want someone who has like a corporate mentality, a big picture mentality, planning ahead, outside experience, not like our last team president that was a driver and was here for 30 years and ended up taking over. Like, great story for him. Awesome. He was a big part of us getting the Vegas situation settled. So it wasn't like a failure by any means, but this ma shit has to stop. It has to stop. We got to be treated like $1 billion company, which it is. And it starts with the GM. It starts with the owner and then moves on to the GM. Soto, you want the last word before we roll out of here?
That's all I had to say.
That's a first. All right. We'll have our regular show on Wednesday. It'll be available on the podcast. We'll also have some special stuff coming out this week now that it's officially off season, and every ending is a new beginning. And now it's going to be one of the most interesting seasons in NFL history that the Raiders had. It's going to be equally interesting this offseason about what's going to happen, and it's already starting. And we'll keep you up to date on all those movings and shakings. Until then, knock on wood if you're with me.